I turned 29 and got a text from Mom. Hope you had cake or something. No call. No visit. A week later, she sent another. We're throwing Dad's retirement party. $3,500 per person. Venmo me. I was invited, but only his wallet. No one mentioned my birthday. No one asked how I was. I didn't respond. I, 29M, stared at my phone screen, reading Mom's text for the 10th time. The casual dismissal of my birthday still stung, but it was the follow-up message that really got to me. $3,500 per person, like I was some kind of ATM with legs. The thing is, this wasn't new. I'd been the family bank for years, ever since I landed my job in tech. Every family emergency, every vacation, every celebration somehow required my financial contribution. But this felt different, more brazen, more insulting. I sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by the silence that had become my 29th birthday. No calls, no visits, just Mom's afterthought text and the expectation that I'd fund Dad's retirement party like some anonymous benefactor. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad was retiring from his six-figure job, and somehow I was expected to foot the bill for his celebration. Meanwhile, my own milestone birthday had been acknowledged with all the enthusiasm of a grocery list reminder. I decided not to respond to the Venmo request. For the first time in years, I was going to let them figure it out themselves. 3 days passed before my phone started buzzing. Mom called twice, then my sister, then my brother. I let them all go to voicemail. When I finally listened to the messages, the progression was predictable. Confusion, then irritation, then barely contained anger about my lack of response. My sister's message was particularly revealing. She asked why I was being so difficult about Dad's party, reminding me that family comes first. She mentioned how disappointed everyone was that I hadn't even acknowledged the invitation. Not once did she mention my birthday. Not once did she ask if I was okay. That's when I realized something that had been building for years. I wasn't actually part of this family. I was a resource, a convenient source of funding for their plans and dreams, but not someone whose own milestones mattered. The plan formed slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. If they wanted to treat me like a bank, I'd show them what happens when the bank closes. I started with the basics. Over the next week, I quietly documented every financial request they'd made over the past 5 years. The spreadsheet grew longer than I expected. Vacations, car repairs, medical bills, home renovations, my brother's wedding, my sister's business startup. The total was staggering. Nearly $60,000. And that was just what I could remember and verify through my bank records. Next, I did something I'd never done before. I calculated interest. Not loan shark rates, just standard personal loan interest that any bank would charge. The number made me dizzy. They owed me over $75,000. But I wasn't planning to collect money. I had something else in mind. I created a group text with all of them. Mom, Dad, my sister, and my brother. Then I typed out a message that had been brewing in my mind for days. I told them I'd been thinking about Dad's retirement party and realized I needed to be more financially responsible. I mentioned that I'd been reviewing my expenses and discovered I'd been quite generous with family over the years. I said I was implementing some changes to my personal budget. The responses came quickly. Mom wanted to know what I meant. Dad asked if there was a problem. My sister demanded clarification. I waited a full day before responding. Then I sent the spreadsheet. Every loan, every payment, every time I'd covered their expenses. All itemized, dated, and totaled. I explained that while I'd never expected repayment before, my financial advisor had suggested I needed to treat family loans more professionally going forward. I told them I was restructuring all outstanding debts into formal loan agreements with standard interest rates and payment plans. I said I'd be happy to attend Dad's retirement party once my current outstanding loans were addressed. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 days later, my phone exploded. Everyone was calling at once. The messages ranged from hurt to angry to desperate. Mom accused me of being petty and vindictive. Dad said I was embarrassing the family. My sister called me selfish. My brother tried a different approach, suggesting we talk it through like adults. I responded to each of them the same way. I told them I was simply applying the same standards to family relationships that they'd taught me. I reminded them that when they needed money, it was always urgent and important. I explained that my financial stability was equally important, and I needed to protect it. The really satisfying part was watching them scramble. Suddenly, they were all very interested in talking to me. They wanted to meet for coffee, to have family dinners, to work things out. The attention I'd craved for years was finally flowing. But now it felt hollow because I knew what motivated it. Dad's retirement party date was approaching, and I could see the panic setting in. My brother called to tell me they'd decided to scale back the celebration. Instead of the expensive venue and catered affair, they were thinking about something more modest. He asked if I might reconsider contributing to the smaller event. I told him I'd be happy to attend any celebration they planned, but my policy on loans hadn't changed. If they wanted my financial participation, they needed to address the existing debt first. That's when things got interesting. My sister called the next day with a proposal. She offered to pay back $5,000 immediately if I'd contribute to the party and forget about the rest. When I declined, she accused me of holding the family hostage over money. I reminded her that I'd never held anyone hostage. I'd simply stopped being an unlimited source of funding. If that felt like hostage-taking, maybe they needed to examine their expectations. The breakthrough came when my brother showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot as he asked if we could talk. I invited him in, curious about this new approach. He sat on my couch and, for the first time in years, asked how I was doing. Really doing. Not as a prelude to a financial request, but like he actually cared about the answer. I told him about my birthday, about sitting alone in my apartment, reading Mom's dismissive text while they were probably planning Dad's elaborate party, about feeling like a walking ATM instead of a son and brother. He was quiet for a long time. Then he admitted something that surprised me. He said they'd all gotten so used to my help that they'd stopped seeing me as a person with my own needs and feelings. He said my birthday had fallen through the cracks because they'd been so focused on party planning, but he realized that wasn't an excuse. He apologized. Actually apologized. Not for needing money, but for taking me for granted. I felt something shift in my chest. This was what I'd been waiting for. Not the money, not even the acknowledgement of the debt. Just someone in my family recognizing that I mattered beyond my bank account. But I wasn't ready to let them off the hook completely. I told my brother I appreciated his apology, but words weren't enough anymore. I'd spent years being the family's financial safety net, and it had cost me my sense of worth within the family. If they wanted to rebuild that relationship, it needed to be on different terms. He asked what I meant. I explained that I was willing to forgive the existing debt, but only if certain conditions were met. First, no more financial requests for at least a year. They needed to learn to manage without me as a backup plan. Second, they needed to acknowledge my birthday and other milestones the same way they did for everyone else. Third, any future financial help would be treated as a formal loan with written agreements and payment schedules. He listened without arguing, then asked if I'd be willing to come to a family dinner to discuss this with everyone. I agreed, but on one condition. Dad's retirement party would proceed without my financial contribution. Whatever they could afford on their own budget was what they'd have. No guilt trips, no last-minute appeals, no expectations that I'd change my mind. He agreed. Update 1. The family dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday. I spent the week wondering if I'd made a mistake, if I was being too harsh. But every time I wavered, I remembered my 29th birthday and the casual way they'd dismissed it. I arrived at my parents' house to find everyone already there. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile. Mom hugged me when I walked in, though it felt forced. Dad shook my hand and mumbled something about needing to talk. We sat around the same dining room table where we'd shared thousands of meals growing up. The irony wasn't lost on me that it took a financial standoff to get us all in the same room for a real conversation. My brother had apparently briefed everyone on our earlier discussion. Mom started by apologizing for missing my birthday, though she tried to explain that they'd been busy with party planning. I stopped her there. I told her that busy wasn't an excuse for forgetting your son's birthday, while simultaneously planning an expensive celebration. I said it revealed their priorities clearly, and I wasn't interested in hearing justifications. Dad looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and said he hadn't realized I'd been contributing so much over the years. He claimed he thought most of the money had been gifts, not loans. I pulled out printed copies of the spreadsheet and placed one in front of each of them. I explained that this wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect and recognition. I told them I'd been feeling like an outsider in my own family, valued only for my ability to solve financial problems. My sister was the first to really engage. She admitted that they'd gotten into a pattern of turning to me whenever money was tight. She said it had seemed natural because I was doing well financially, but she could see now how it must have felt from my perspective. The conversation went on for 2 hours. There were tears, arguments, and moments of real honesty. Mom admitted she'd been taking my financial help for granted. Dad acknowledged that he'd never properly thanked me for all the support over the years. My siblings both apologized for treating me like a bank instead of a brother. But the real breakthrough came when Mom asked a question that surprised me. She wanted to know why I'd never said anything before, why I'd let the resentment build instead of addressing it earlier. I thought about it for a moment, then gave her an honest answer. I told her I'd been afraid that if I stopped being useful, I'd stop being wanted. That my financial contributions felt like the only thing that made me valuable to the family. The room got very quiet after that. Dad was the one who finally broke the silence. He said something I'd never heard from him before. He told me he was proud of who I'd become, not what I could afford to give them. He said my success had made him feel like he'd done something right as a father, but he'd expressed it in all the wrong ways. We agreed to my terms. No financial requests for a year. Proper acknowledgement of birthdays and milestones. Any future loans would be formal agreements. They also agreed to pay for Dad's retirement party themselves, whatever they could afford. As I was leaving, my sister pulled me aside. She asked if I'd be willing to help plan Dad's scaled-down party, not financially, but with time and effort. She said they'd realized they'd been focusing so much on making it expensive that they'd forgotten about making it meaningful. I agreed. Update 2. Dad's retirement party happened 3 weeks later. Instead of the 5-star venue and professional catering, they held it at my parents' house. My brother and I grilled burgers and hot dogs. My sister made decorations. Mom organized photo displays of Dad's career. It cost them maybe $300 total. It was the best family gathering we'd had in years. Dad gave a speech where he thanked everyone who'd supported him throughout his career. When he got to me, he didn't mention money or financial help. He talked about how proud he was of my work ethic and character. He said he'd learned something important from his son about the difference between being needed and being loved. I actually got emotional. For the first time in years, I felt like a son instead of a resource. The party was small but genuine. Dad's closest friends and colleagues came. Everyone brought stories and memories. It felt like what a retirement party should be, a celebration of a life's work, not a display of wealth. But the real test of our new family dynamic came a month later. My brother's car broke down, and the repair estimate was $1,500. His old pattern would have been to call me immediately, explain the emergency, and assume I'd handle it. Instead, he called to tell me what had happened and to vent about the stress. I listened, offered sympathy, and asked if he needed help brainstorming solutions. I didn't offer money, and he didn't ask for it. He ended up getting a personal loan from his bank and trading down to a less expensive used car. When he told me how he'd handled it, he seemed proud of himself for managing the crisis independently. That's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. My birthday this year was different. Mom called first thing in the morning to wish me happy birthday and tell me she loved me. Dad sent a card with a handwritten note about being grateful for who I am, not what I do. My siblings both made plans to celebrate with me. No one asked for money. No one mentioned any upcoming expenses. They just wanted to celebrate me. I'm not naive enough to think our family is perfect now. Old patterns die hard, and there will probably be moments when they slip back into treating me like the family bank. But we've established new boundaries, and more importantly, we've had conversations about what went wrong. The financial spreadsheet is still saved on my computer, but I'll probably never need it again. Not because they've paid me back, they haven't, and I don't expect them to, but because the real debt has been settled. They owe me recognition, respect, and genuine care. That's what I've been missing, and that's what I've finally received. Looking back, I realized my 29th birthday was actually a gift. The dismissive text and the casual money request finally pushed me to demand better treatment. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose something before you can figure out what it's actually worth. My family is worth fighting for, but only if they're willing to fight for me too. Turns out, they were. They just needed to be reminded that I'm more than my bank account balance. The revenge I'd planned was really about getting their attention and respect. Mission accomplished. But the best part wasn't making them scramble or feel guilty. It was discovering that underneath all the financial entanglement, we actually do love each other. We just needed to remember how to show it properly. Final update. It's been 6 months since the retirement party, and I wanted to share how things have settled. The one-year moratorium on financial requests is still holding strong. There have been a few moments when I could tell someone wanted to ask for help, but they've caught themselves. My sister's business hit a rough patch, and I could see her struggling with whether to reach out. Instead, she asked for advice and emotional support, which felt like a much healthier dynamic. We've started having regular family dinners again, something we hadn't done in years. Not because anyone needs anything, but because we actually enjoy each other's company. It's amazing how much more relaxed everyone is when there's no underlying financial tension. Mom has become almost obsessive about remembering important dates now. She calls on random anniversaries of things I'd forgotten I'd ever mentioned caring about. It's a bit much, but I can tell she's genuinely trying to make up for years of taking me for granted. Dad and I have started talking more about work and life, not just when family finances come up. He's been asking about my career goals and offering actual fatherly advice. It's the relationship I'd wanted for years, but didn't know how to ask for. The most surprising development has been my brother. He started checking in on me regularly, just to see how I'm doing. Last week, he invited me to go hiking with him, something we hadn't done since we were teenagers. While we were walking, he thanked me again for forcing the family to confront how they'd been treating me. He said it had made him examine other relationships in his life too. I've also learned something about myself through all this. I realized I'd been enabling their behavior as much as they'd been taking advantage of me. It was easier to write a check than to have difficult conversations about boundaries and respect. The money had become a shield that protected me from having to demand better treatment directly. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, even when people react like it is. My family's initial anger and panic when I stopped being their ATM showed me how unhealthy our dynamic had become. Real relationships shouldn't be built on financial dependence. The lesson here isn't that money ruins families. It's that unclear expectations and unspoken resentments do. If I'd addressed this years ago, we could have avoided a lot of pain on both sides. But I'm grateful it happened when it did, before the damage became irreparable. To anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my situation, you're not being selfish by demanding respect. You're not being cruel by setting boundaries. And you're not obligated to fund other people's dreams at the expense of your own emotional well-being. Family should be about more than financial convenience. It took a spreadsheet and a threat to make mine remember that, but it was worth every uncomfortable conversation. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is forcing them to appreciate what they already have.